A millionaire father, consumed by his own insecurities, made the heart-wrenching decision to dismiss the one person who had become a beacon of true love and comfort in his daughter's life, unable to bear the thought that someone else might be taking his place in her heart. That night, the little girl had a high fever, kept slipping into delirium, and the name she called out wasn't Dad. Maybe love isn't about protecting, but knowing when to let go. And maybe, just maybe, there are things we need to relearn from the very child we thought needed to be taught. Because sometimes, losing control is when real love finally begins. Fairwood International School on a chilly March afternoon, carrying the spring moisture that hasn't yet learned to bloom inside, like a quiet ceremony unfolding. Midterm parent-teacher meetings in a softly lit room, warmed by lightwood paneling and gentle yellow lamps, chairs neatly arranged in a half circle. The atmosphere hovered between polite and personal, a space where praise sometimes mingled with careful encouragement about second graders. James Whitaker sat in the second row, his white shirt perfectly pressed, tie snug, sitting up straight. He listened with the calm attention of a man familiar with meetings, steady and composed, but his eyes kept drifting toward Emily, his 7-year-old daughter. She sat with the teacher in a small circle up front, her light brown hair tied with 2 sky blue ribbons like springtime, smiling brightly as the teacher read aloud the student's emotion journal. The teacher's name was Lydia Young, her voice warm as she reached Emily's part. Her tone was gentle in a way that still surprises you when something unexpectedly touches your heart. Emily had written, "Clara said I don't have to do anything special to be loved. Just be myself." A soft wave of wonder passed among the parents. A few chuckles followed the adult's kindness, as if something sounded too precious to be taken seriously. But no one noticed how James's hands clenched tightly on his knee. No one saw the sudden heaviness take root in his chest. The man beside him, a father of a boy from another class, leaned over with a half-joking smile. "Looks like the nanny's influence runs deeper than the parents." James smiled. Technically, his lips moved, but his eyes didn't. He said nothing for the rest of the meeting. James stayed silent. Emily beamed and laughed. The teacher praised her confidence, emotional clarity, imagination, and empathetic traits. James had long tried to nurture her through structure, standards, perfect routines, and quiet discipline. But instead of pride, he felt something cling to him like a soaked sweater, heavy and unexplainable. On the way home, Emily chattered excitedly about every detail the teacher mentioned, which stickers she got, and the toys from the class prize box. Clara sat up front, calm and unobtrusive, leaving space for both of them. Every now and then, she turned back with a gentle smile, asking a soft question. James kept looking down the road, but his mind was still in that room, wrapped around a gentle phrase that cut deeper than he expected. "Just having you is enough." That night, he helped Emily to bed. She had brushed her teeth, her damp hair falling over her patented pajamas with a yawning cat on them. Just then, he reached for the light switch. She whispered, "Dad, sit down on the edge of the bed." She asked, "Dad, do you know what Clara said?" Emily whispered, "I don't have to be like anyone else to be loved. Just being me is enough." Her voice was soft. It wasn't just a statement. It was a truth she declared. James stroked her hair and said, "Good night," then stood up and gently closed the door behind him. But his heart didn't shut along with it. Then, as if driven by something deeper, he stepped down the dim hallway. The nightlight cast faint beams along the baseboards. Then, as if pushed by something deeper than thought, he stopped outside Clara's room. He stood there for a long moment, not out of anger, not even hurt, but because of a rising urgency, a vague and persistent pain, as if he didn't act now, he might lose his place as a father in his own home. Finally, he knocked 3 short, deliberate taps. James didn't hesitate. His voice, Clara opened the door, her hair neatly tied back, her face calm as if she had seen this coming. James didn't hesitate, his voice low, even cold. "I think this will be your last week here." Clara didn't ask why. She just nodded. "I understand," she said quietly. The door closed, a soft click, but the sound echoed in James's chest, long and hollow. He turned away, but didn't move. standing in the hallway, his hand clenching, then releasing, then clenching again. The light from the floor cast his shadow far behind him, stretched and crooked, like the unspoken question twisted deep in his chest. Why does this hurt so much when I was the one who chose it? The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet, like water holding its breath before a storm. James woke up earlier than usual. He stood in front of the mirror longer than necessary, adjusting his tie even though it was perfect, as if fixing it a little more might make everything else in his life fall back into place. Emily said nothing about the parent-teacher meeting. The teacher said nothing about what she had written. She sat at the table, chewing toast with a silence too mature for a 7-year-old. Not angry, not sad, just distant. Clara remained gentle, calm, professional to a degree no one else could match. He couldn't blame the girl for anything. But in her eyes, James felt something drifting away. Not anger, not noise, just the quiet fading of a light that promised not to stay. That night, after Clara had retreated to her room and only the two of them remained at the table, James decided it was time to tell her, not expecting any reaction. He wasn't bracing for a storm. In his mind, he was doing the responsible thing. "Right, Clara, I'll be leaving this weekend." He said he had arranged everything. The words fell like a pebble into a bowl of hot miso soup. No splashing, no echo, just a ripple spreading through the air, into their breath, into the room that had become too still. Emily froze, the spoon hovering mid-air, her wide eyes looking at him as if she'd just heard something meaningless. Then suddenly, the spoon dropped, a soft clink sharp as broken glass. She stood up, her voice bursting out, "Why would you do that? You're so selfish!" James froze. Chopsticks paused at his lips. Frozen. Chopsticks stopped at his lips. Emily, his quiet child, his sweet, good daughter, was now trembling, her face flushed like a flame long held inside. "You never asked what I wanted, not once, never, ever. Since I was little, you decided what was best. You made me learn piano even though I hated it. You sent me to camp when all I wanted was to stay home and draw with Clara." Her words weren't weak sobs. They ripped out from her chest. Not anger, but finally the truth set free. "You never once asked if I was happy." James opened his mouth, but said nothing. His throat tightened. All the words he never said, all the moments he missed. Emily didn't give him a chance. "You always thought you knew what was best for me, but did you ever sit down and ask Emily, 'Are you happy?'" Then, her little finger pointed straight at him, something she'd never dared to do before. "I'm tired of having to be the daughter worthy of love. I have to be smart. I have to be polite. I have to be the perfect daughter you show off to others." Her voice rose, now trembling. "Clara was the first person to tell me I don't have to be anyone else, that just being myself is enough. I don't have to be top of the class to be praised. I don't have to be so good that I'm not allowed to cry." She stepped back, tears rolling down her rosy cheeks, her eyes red but clear. She turned and rushed up the stairs. Her footsteps pounded each stair, then the bedroom door slammed shut like a verdict. James stood there, still holding the chopsticks, but his hands felt empty. His whole body felt empty. No more sounds, no clinking spoons, no breathing, no rhythm of a quiet dinner between father and son. Just a house suddenly empty and a voice still echoing in his mind. "You never asked if I was happy. If you were her, what would you say to a father who always believed he was right, but never asked if he was happy?" Leave a message for James in the comments below. Maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what he needs to hear right now. Amanda arrived on Monday morning, wrapped in gray. Light filtered through the window of the silent house, as if the breath had been held too long. She wore a cream dress, her hair neatly tied up, a pair of clear-framed glasses sitting neatly on her nose. Her smile was measured, her tone steady, never too much, never too little. Everything about her seemed balanced, like she had just stepped out of a textbook from the most prestigious teacher's college in the city. Emily didn't come to greet her. She sat on the stairs, knees pulled to her chest, staring down as if the world below had nothing to do with her. When Amanda approached, Emily stood silently, turned around, and went into the room without saying hello or glancing back. Amanda smiled the kind of patient smile you learn when patience is part of your job. Since that day, Clara only existed in the absence of the house. James had noticed it in the little things. A broken glass that no one replaced, an empty vase on the dining table, the way the silence at noon no longer carried the quiet rhythm of a ukulele string. Clara left nothing behind, but her absence was everywhere. Amanda strictly followed the schedule, waking Emily right on time, serving lunch in portions, reading stories in 15-minute segments, taking the little girl outside at the end of the afternoon without a word. The girl didn't miss a single beat. Everything moved like a Swiss watch. But Emily was no longer Emily. She spoke less, didn't argue, didn't complain, didn't ask for 5 more minutes to play. When Amanda suggested drawing one day, Emily shook her head. Not sad, not sulking, just no. That afternoon, the park was quiet. Emily played alone on the slide. Her shadow stretched across the sunlit sidewalk. Amanda sat on a bench, jotting something down in a small notebook, feeling something drop onto her chest just before Emily slid down the slide. Her foot slipped, but she stopped on the ground softly. James was watching from inside the car, feeling something fall onto his chest before he could reach for the door handle. Amanda stood up. "Are you okay? I'll get a cool cloth." The little girl turned away to get the cloth. Emily watched her go, not crying, but her small fists were clenched tightly at her sides. When Amanda came back, Emily was already standing, wiping her knee with her sleeve and walking away without a word, not looking anyone in the eye. In the car, James watched that moment as if someone was looking at broken glass underwater, silent but irreversible. That night, at dinner, Emily ate. Amanda slowly told the story, bit by bit, about a bird that could sing perfectly on beat and a little girl who arranged her toys by color. James looked at his daughter and asked, "Do you like Miss Amanda?" Emily nodded a slow, weak nod, like stamping a document someone else had already signed. That evening, James went up to her room, about to say something but stopped. The door was slightly open, and there was an unfinished drawing on the floor. The drawing showed a little girl standing alone in a park. The space around her was empty, no friends, no adults, no colors, only a streak of sunlight slanted down from the sky to the ground. And the girl was standing outside the picture. James knelt down, his eyes tracing the pencil lines. Hesitant, but certain, not right, not wrong, just real. And in that moment, he understood that some absences don't need to be named. But when they show up, they carry the warmth of a whole home. And Clara, though she was gone, was still the only one. Emily had drawn that. The rain had been falling all afternoon, persistent and gloomy. Not strong enough to be called a storm, but too steady to just be a light sprinkle. The house lay under a soft gray shroud. The sky was hazy and silent, seen from Emily's bedroom window. A warm yellow light glowed faintly through the mist, like a candle's flame flickering in a dream just before it breaks. James came home late, still in his old suit and carrying his briefcase, but something in his eyes had changed. A flicker of disorientation and fragility he hadn't felt before. Amanda opened the door with her usual calm. Her voice was steady. Even Emily had a slight fever. "I gave her some medicine and wiped her down. She's asleep now," she said, sounding like a nurse finishing her shift. "No worry, no distance, just matter of fact." James nodded. He went upstairs without taking off his coat, his car keys still in hand. He stopped in front of his daughter's door. The air behind it felt different, thicker, like a fog you could almost reach out and touch. Inside, Emily curled the blanket up to her chin, her cheeks flushed, damp curls sticking to her temples. She moaned softly, her lips parted with a fevered breath. James stepped closer, about to whisper her name when something made him freeze. "Clara, don't go." A hoarse voice rumbled like wind slipping through cracks in a stone wall. "Don't let them take me away." James stood frozen. He had never heard his daughter call anyone's name in her sleep. Definitely not like this. Emily stirred, her tiny hands clutching the edge of the blanket tightly. "I'm okay. I won't bother anyone anymore. Clara, hug me." James's heart tightened in his chest. He bent down, wiped sweat from her forehead, then noticed something clenched in her hand. A crumpled piece of paper, damp with sweat. He gently unfolded it. It was loose, a drawing Emily had made of herself trapped in a windowless, dark room. A small figure curled in the corner, arms wrapped around knees. And next to her, drawn just beyond the wall, was a shadowy figure without a face, but he knew it was Clara's shape. The little girl was outside a door, locked from the inside. James stared at the paper, and the air in the room thickened, like breathing through a wind, as if the walls themselves were sucking oxygen from the air. He wanted to scream that this wasn't true, to believe it was just a nightmare they would all wake up from soon. But Emily shifted. Her voice broke the silence once again. "Clara, I'm not scared. Daddy's never scared." James collapsed into the chair beside her bed, bathed in the soft yellow light. His face aged 10 years unpolished, unruly, no arguments, just a man stripped of all the certain titles of pride, watching his child cling to a world he had pushed away. He looked at the sick child before him, holding on to someone who was no longer here, and for the first time, he realized he was no longer the person she called when the world got dark, not the father who lost control, but no longer the place a scared child runs back to. The room still smelled faintly of orange blossoms, the shampoo scent Clara had once picked for Emily. No one mentioned her name for days, but that scent lingered like a memory that refused to be put away. James stepped into his daughter's room. The lights were off. Only the porch light gently slipped through striped curtains, casting shadows on the walls. Emily was sound asleep, her cheeks still flushed from the fever the night before. She curled under the blanket like a small animal trying to hide something fragile. He was about to leave when he noticed the pillow was slightly askew. As he bent down to fix it, his hand touched something solid beneath a familiar object he must have touched before, but never really looked at closely. It was a small cardboard box, a corner of the old outer paper peeled away. He opened the lid. Inside was a pale blue woven bracelet with uneven stitches. One loop had come undone. He recognized it immediately. Clara had made it for Emily during a week she had the flu. She had told him it was a lucky charm. Emily believed in it so deeply that she often wore it even while sleeping. Lately, she hadn't worn it at all, probably afraid he would ask. Under the bracelet was a folded piece of paper. James opened it, the hallway light catching the soft, faded blue ink. "You are loved not because you're good at anything, but simply because you are you." There was never a signature, but James knew. He knew in that way pain sometimes knows exactly where to land. Each word sank into his chest like a weight pressing down on a pit. He read each sentence over and over, slowly, quietly, painfully. Always was a word he had never said. You, just for being you, are a truth he never spoke. He had thought love meant guidance, expectations outlining a path he believed was right. He never stopped to ask if that was the path she wanted. He folded the letter again and then opened it once more. His hands were wet, and he turned to Emily. She was still asleep. Her breathing was soft and steady. Her arm lay on her chest at the head of the bed, arranged like a rag doll, missing one ear, sewn long ago by Clara with red thread. Emily placed it there every night, a silent ritual he had never noticed. James started to cry quietly, just trembling, a kind of crying that didn't demand attention, a silent cry that breaks down the idea of who you thought you were, thinking you are a burden, no blame. The air mourned a sacred thing you didn't realize you missed until it was too late to claim it fully. That night, James sat by his daughter until dawn. He said nothing, just held the letter in his hands, as if by doing so, he could hold on to the love Clara had never stopped giving him all those years. For the first time, James didn't feel responsible. He was someone learning to love slowly, without conditions, plans, or worries, just simply being there. Sunday morning came like a light breeze after the night, confused by dreams. Emily had recovered, but was not yet the bright child she used to be. She had been that way before. Now she was quieter, though her eyes had softened like a fever, carrying a bit of heaviness, leaving a lighter but still cold space. James woke early. Not tired or lazy, just calm like someone who finally knew what he had to do, even if he had never done it before. He wore a simple shirt, no tie, carrying nothing but a folded drawing and a small, worn, green knitted bracelet. Emily was still asleep, clutching tightly to her worn cloth doll. James bent down and gently kissed her forehead, not out of obligation, but because of something else, something more sincere. Then he left the house, his hand gripping the door handle lightly, but inside, something trembled like a string pulled too tight for too long. Scene 6. A late thank you. Clara's apartment was in the old town, south of the city, where the maple trees shed red leaves as if the sky itself understood the need to let go of what had become too fragile. James stood in front of the wooden door, the paint peeling along the edges. He hadn't knocked yet. He wasn't afraid of being rejected, nor did he hope for forgiveness. After 3 short knocks, the door opened. Clara stood there in an oversized sweater, her hair tied up. No makeup. It was just her. The surprise in her eyes made James feel like a stranger for a moment. James's voice was warm, but not cold. He nodded, didn't interrupt or speak right away, quietly unfolding the paper to reveal a drawing of a girl with a tear down the middle of her arm. On one side was the outline of Clara, on the other, 2 figures of James, drawn separately. "These are the lines I brought here," he said slowly, "to say thank you." Clara hesitated, her hand resting on the doorframe as if she needed to steady herself. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he added. He knew it was too late for many things, but maybe not too late to say something he should have said a long time ago. He reached into his pocket, took out the green bracelet, and gently placed it in his open palm. "You made this," he said. "Emily still keeps it under her pillow with a letter." Clara looked at the bracelet, then back at him. Something flickered in her eyes. A spark, a crack, a memory she needed to reclaim herself. James spoke, his voice barely audible. "Not some version I designed, not a report card, just a child loved unconditionally." They stood in silence for a long moment, only the wind rustling through the narrow hallway, carrying dry leaves across the doorstep. Clara neither stepped forward nor back. "Do you know why I never said goodbye?" she asked, eyes still on the bracelet. James shook his head because he knew that one day Emily would teach her things he couldn't put into words. And if that happened, he wanted it to be her choice, not his. James said nothing, his chest heavy not with guilt, but with the realization of how much he'd let slip away. "I spent too much time trying to do things right," he whispered, "and too little time just being there." Clara nodded once, not forgiveness, not goodbye, just a quiet acknowledgement from someone broken and beginning to heal. James stepped back, bowed his head in thanks. He said again that he loved her the way she needed in my place. Then he turned and slowly walked down the stairs. Behind him, the door didn't slam shut. It closed softly, like a final sigh. In his hand, the green knitted bracelet was gentle and warm, and in his heart, something unfamiliar had taken root. Not regret, but a beginning. As James stepped out of Clara's small apartment, the rain had stopped. Puddles shimmered with the last light of the afternoon, and the air smelled of fresh leaves and damp earth, as if the world had been washed clean of something heavy. He couldn't remember the last time his heart felt so light, not because he'd been forgiven, but because he no longer needed to control anything. The storm inside had passed. What remained was an empty shore and a wide open sky. It was time to go home, not as someone trying to fix the past, but as someone ready to learn how to walk beside his child, step by step. That afternoon, the clouds gently covered the sky. The soft, faint light filtered into the house as if today didn't need sunshine, just presence. James entered Emily's room with a freshly washed pillow tucked under one arm and an old box of colored pencils in the other, the same box he'd once seen Clara and Emily share. Emily was folding paper. She looked up when she saw him. He didn't sit in a chair but on the floor, eye level with her. His voice was low and uneven. "I have something to tell you." Emily set the paper down. "Clara won't be your babysitter anymore," he said gently. He paused, looking at her carefully. She told him she would be going back to school. There was something new she was really excited to learn. He stopped, looked at her carefully. Emily didn't cry or frown. She just stood still. But James went on. "Clara said if you need her, she'll come visit. She's not gone." She just won't live here anymore." Emily looked down, drawing a line on the floor with her finger. James waited a beat, then spoke more slowly this time. "I think everyone has their own path, and I realized I forgot to ask you about your path." Emily looked up. "You never asked me where I wanted to go, what I liked, or what I hoped for. Love, yes, but Clara taught him how to love a person. He thought if he did everything right, that was showing love. But Clara taught him that loving someone means walking alongside them, not dragging them behind." He gently placed the box of colored pencils in front of her. "If you'll let me say this, I want to ask for a place on your journey, not to lead, but just to walk beside you, wherever you choose to go." Emily didn't say anything, but then she opened the box, took out a blank sheet of paper, and started to draw. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't promise anything, she just began. James stood next to her, quietly watching, not interrupting. After a while, Emily handed him a drawing with 3 figures: James, Emily, and Clara together in a park. Above them in the sky, a heart-shaped kite. James wasn't standing in front. He stood to the side, holding the kite string, eyes looking up where Clara and Emily were smiling. James gently asked, "Is this what you want?" Emily nodded, and James understood. She didn't need Clara to come back or to relive the past. She needed Clara as a living memory. She needed her father. She needed someone who could stand beside her, not in front. He gently held the drawing in his hands, said nothing, but inside his chest, for the first time, he felt something new. He was loved not because he was in front or had done everything right, but because he was here. They kept drawing, not to create a masterpiece, but to start over with color, with paper, with simple, real presence. That night, the sky was still gloomy like the afternoon before, but something inside the house had changed. As if a cloth had been lifted off the table to reveal the wood grain underneath, old and uneven, but warm. James went into the kitchen earlier than usual. He cooked for himself. No takeout, no help. Simple dishes, pumpkin soup, pan-seared chicken, steamed broccoli. Meals Clara used to make for Emily when she had a mild cold. Nothing fancy, just enough to feel cared for. Emily sat down at the table before he even called her. No coloring books, no toys, just her quiet hands resting on her lap, eyes watching him move around. She didn't say a word, but her eyes softened like a small flame flickering after a long, cold rain. James set the meal, invited her to eat. No ceremony, no pressure. A smile shared by just 2 people sitting together like they had for many years, only this time, no one was playing a role. Mid-meal, just as James was sliding the last piece of broccoli onto her plate, Emily looked up. Her dad paused. She tilted her head slightly and said in a soft but steady voice, "What if we learned to love each other all over again?" From the start, James froze. The broccoli fell onto her plate without a sound. He didn't ask where she heard those words, didn't ask why she said them. He just looked at her for a long, full moment, as if seeing a gentler, braver version of himself in the mirror. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his phone on the table, didn't scroll or open it, just silenced it, placed it face down on the wood floor, and pulled his hand back. A silent promise was made without a single spoken vow. "Yes," he said finally, his voice soft but sure. "I think we can start this dinner." Emily didn't smile, but her eyes lit up with a kind of trust he hadn't seen in them for a long time. They kept eating, not perfectly, not pretending, just honestly. Maybe for the first time, between spoonfuls of soup and bites of cold chicken, James noticed something strange. The silence no longer confused him, not because words were missing, but because of the foundation beneath them, the kind of silence where something new could someday grow. After dinner, James washed the dishes. Emily wiped the table. No one brought up the past, but in every simple movement, one thing became clear: they were relearning how to be together, not out of habit, not by rules, but through presence. Before going to bed, Emily turned and asked, "Are you free tomorrow?" James nodded. "I want to fly a kite," she said. He didn't answer. He just stepped closer, bent down, and for the first time hugged her, not out of fear of losing her, but from a quiet wish, simply to be near, outside, The night wind blew through the cracked window. Inside that little house, no one said the end because they knew the truest relationships have no endings. They change, they reshape, and if you're brave enough, they can always start anew. Sometimes, the smallest acts carry the heaviest weight. Through this story, we're reminded that compassion doesn't always come with a grand announcement. It often appears in the quiet moments, in the simple gestures, in someone choosing to see your pain and stay anyway. What we witnessed wasn't just a tale of hardship, it was a journey of rediscovering one's worth, of learning to breathe again after being unseen for so long. Our main character, despite being pushed down by life again and again, never gave up on kindness. Whether it was wiping the floor with quiet dignity, offering a smile even when her own world was crumbling, or simply listening without judgment, she showed us the power of showing up, even when no one else does. Her story proves that being broken doesn't mean you're unworthy. Sometimes, it means you're the one most capable of helping someone else find their way. To everyone watching, if her quiet resilience moved you, let her know. Share your words of support in the comments because people like her don't often hear how much their presence matters. Remind her that she isn't invisible, that her courage to keep going, even in silence, inspired you. And if you were in her shoes, if you've ever felt small, discarded, or voiceless, maybe this is your sign to reach out, to forgive yourself, to believe that healing is possible, because it is, and because sometimes the right people show up just when you're about to give up on being seen. What do you think she should do next? Should she trust that maybe, just maybe, goodness still exists, that not every kind gesture is followed by disappointment? Share your thoughts, we'd love to hear them. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you pause, reflect, or even shed a quiet tear, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Touching Tales Hub, where stories like this live and breathe, stories of real emotions, of second chances, of love in its rawest, most beautiful form. Because in a world that often rushes past the quiet ones, we want to be the place that listens, the place that reminds you you are not alone. The next story might be yours, or it might be the one you didn't know you needed to hear. Either way, we'll be here. Until then, stay kind, stay open, and above all, stay human. Losing her, but from a quiet wish, simply to be near. Outside, the night wind blew through the cracked window. Inside that little house, no one said the end because they knew the truest relationships have no endings. They change, they reshape, and if you're brave enough, they can always start anew. Sometimes, the smallest acts carry the heaviest weight. Through this story, we're reminded that compassion doesn't always come with a grand announcement. It often appears in the quiet moments, in the simple gestures, in someone choosing to see your pain and stay anyway. What we witnessed wasn't just a tale of hardship, it was a journey of rediscovering one's worth, of learning to breathe again after being unseen for so long. Our main character, despite being pushed down by life again and again, never gave up on kindness. Whether it was wiping the floor with quiet dignity, offering a smile even when her own world was crumbling, or simply listening without judgment, she showed us the power of showing up, even when no one else does. Her story proves that being broken doesn't mean you're unworthy. Sometimes, it means you're the one most capable of helping someone else find their way. To everyone watching, if her quiet resilience moved you, let her know. Share your words of support in the comments because people like her don't often hear how much their presence matters. Remind her that she isn't invisible, that her courage to keep going, even in silence, inspired you. And if you were in her shoes, if you've ever felt small, discarded, or voiceless, maybe this is your sign to reach out, to forgive yourself, to believe that healing is possible, because it is, and because sometimes the right people show up just when you're about to give up on being seen. What do you think she should do next? Should she trust that maybe, just maybe, goodness still exists, that not every kind gesture is followed by disappointment? Share your thoughts, we'd love to hear them. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you pause, reflect, or even shed a quiet tear, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Touching Tales Hub, where stories like this live and breathe, stories of real emotions, of second chances, of love in its rawest, most beautiful form, because in a world that often rushes past the quiet ones, we want to be the place that listens, the place that reminds you you are not alone. The next story might be yours, or it might be the one you didn't know you needed to hear. Either way, we'll be here. Until then, stay kind, stay open, and above all, stay human.